Our first presentation today will be led by Doug Henstridge, and that's going to be titled Best Practices in Reactive Facility Maintenance for Public Sector's Facilities. And over the next 30 minutes, Doug is going to kind of cover a very different topics of define the key difference between reactive and proactive maintenance, outline rapid response processes to ensure safety, uptime, and compliance, highlight the importance of governance, data, and accountability, share practical quick wins, and identify common pitfalls to avoid. Please join me in welcoming Doug.
Let's see. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep. If you want to control my screen or I can go through the slides for you, that's awesome.
Yeah, why don't you, I guess you can go through them. I don't see the controls here, unless you want to walk me again how to take it.
I'll go through them.
Okay. So, yeah, so we're going to talk, we have about 25, 30 minutes here. We're going to talk about, best practices, focusing mostly on reactive maintenance. I've done a number of sessions in the past on, preventive maintenance, routine maintenance, but one of the things we find with a lot of our customers is they end up chasing a lot of reactive maintenance. So thought it might be useful to talk a little bit about that this morning or this afternoon, as the case may be. So Bradley, if you want to just click over. Yeah, a real quick, many of you probably know me already. Those who don't, I've been in this industry for a little over 30 years. And I've been with AssetWorks over 11, actually closer to 12 and a half now. And I've been primarily in the implementation side, lately doing more of kind of solution design and also working with our product team to, kind of facilitate some conversation around roadmap prioritization, and kind of that bridge between customer needs and what we're doing with the product. So that's kind of where I fit in. We'll move ahead. So when we talk about reactive maintenance, I think many of you probably are aware of what it is. It's things that happen that are unplanned. They're often triggered by something failing, someone making a report, someone complaining about a condition in a facility. They can be urgent. They may be critical to the operation. They may have a safety impact associated with them. Sometimes they're just an annoyance for the person who's reporting them, but they are things that you need to respond to, react to. This would be right, and this shouldn't be done in place of preventive work. So it shouldn't be a case of, well, we'll go out and it's too hot or too cold in the room, so let's go out and check the air handler, and by the way, let's swap a filter out at the same time. They should be managed within the framework of a larger maintenance program as well, and there should be resources and time allocated for dealing with reactive maintenance. So if we can move over. Can we click over, Bradley? So, and I kind of talked about this. So some of the things that really matter. Oh, I think we went too far. But the focus is often on, things like safety and accessibility, right? Is there a problem with access to a facility? Is there a problem with, an elevator's broken, so you're maybe not ADA compatible for someone who can't walk upstairs, having to get upstairs. There's other impacts to these that you may have to cancel meetings, you may have inconveniencing or making a less than hospitable working environment. The room's too hot, room's too cold, etc. The other, and then thinking about some principles for dealing with reactive maintenance. We're looking at, safety, right? Do we need to make sure we have permits to access things? Do we have staff that can access this? Are there certifications required? A lot of times it involves some kind of a rapid triage. Again, not everything gets created equally, right? That hot, cold call in the conference room may be something that is simple thermostat adjustment. It may be a bigger issue, but, a leak of water or gas or power that's gone out, or some other larger piece of equipment that's broken down, may be more problematic, may involve safety. There's also the need for being accountable to your stakeholders. You need to be able to communicate effectively that you've heard their requests, that you're responding to their requests, that you've completed their requests. If it takes longer, maybe why it's taking longer. Some of the other things you want to be able to do are document what caused it. So that's the concept of the RCA, the root cause analysis. Why did this happen? Did it happen because something broke? Was there an accident? Did something just get old? This is also a case where maybe the preventive maintenance schedule or the routine maintenance isn't as effective as it should be. So these are all things that you need to be keeping track of in reactive maintenance, as well as the ability to balance that backlog with the preventive maintenance plan, so that you're not letting preventive maintenance suffer while you're chasing breakdowns and corrections, which will result in more reactive maintenance potentially. Can you go next, Bradley? Yeah. So like we've alluded to, and I'm not going to dwell on a lot of this, but a lot of the things that, that cause this are things like equipment gets old, right? It gets old, it needs more attention. It's the same in your home, right? As your furnace gets older, it maybe break down, maybe it doesn't fire up as much. Same thing with commercial air handling units, boilers, water heaters, pumps. As they get older, they may tend to have more problems. um, you may have incomplete preventive maintenance, or maybe not optimal PM intervals. So you may be waiting too long between PM intervals to look at things, and then things tend to go bad, especially as equipment gets older. You may need to modify frequency of putting eyes on something to avoid outages and downtime. Um, you might have insufficient spares or for critical systems. Like you have one elevator in the building, the elevator goes down, now you've got a problem. Or same with things like fire alarms and various other safety equipment. You might not have backup, so that when it goes down, you end up with prioritized critical work. The other thing is, you may not be effectively monitoring things. Again, this goes back to preventive maintenance. This goes back to how frequently you touch something or look at something or inspect something, right? There's gaps, or you identify problems late. So that's where you're not really in the ability to do predictive maintenance, start predicting when things might fail and getting out ahead of that, right? Or your contractors and vendors may not always have the appropriate access to do the things they need to do. So these are things that could result in reactive work. Can we go next? And then, so one of the things I want to look at here is your typical kind of reactive maintenance workflow, right? So you have an incident. It could be through a monitoring or an automated detection where you get an alert. It could be something akin to a SCADA system, or something that sends out a monitoring alert that something's failing or off. It could be through frequent monitoring, right? So if you're frequently monitoring something, creating logs of data captured, like you know, uh, you know, for equipment like boiler temperatures, or with pumps and equipment where you're doing daily kind of log checks on them. That data can also prompt you to look at repair work, or you simply get a complaint from the occupants of one of the spaces you manage, right? So then you generally will look at, is it safe to continue working there? Do we need to react more quickly? Is it something that can be deferred maybe a little bit? So these are things you look at there, and that gets into the triage piece of, is this an urgent thing? Is there an impact to work? If you have a power outage and the building is dark, obviously that's a priority. If it's a case where one light went out in one conference room, then maybe that can wait till tomorrow, right? Because you could still use the room, etc. So these are things you look at, right? And that's kind of when the request comes in, that should be evaluated. and priorities should be set for when you respond to things and when not. Some items may get bundled into other actions at a location because they can simply be deferred. When you identify that priority, you would dispatch work. Staff goes on site to do the repair work. They would complete the repair, verify it's done, closure. In some cases, you may want to do a root cause analysis. So if it was something more significant, like power went out. I'm working with a customer this week where they had that case with their 911 center. They lost power. There was an incident happened. It caused the main breaker to trip on the building. All the power went out. Because all the power went out the main, the generator didn't kick in either. And they ended up going through the root cause, and they found that the daisy chain of breakers that would control that and maybe stop that in the middle was inappropriately sized as the building expanded. So that's resulted in, for them, about 8 months of upgrades to get to a point where that won't happen again. But that's where the RCA becomes very effective in identifying what the actual problem is and what we really need to fix after we kind of get the initial problem resolved. So for more of a long-term upgrade or repair. And then when you start looking at that longer term repair, potentially equipment replacement, upgrades, etc., you want to start planning that as a base of this. That data feeds into that planning process. So that generally would be a workflow we'd look at a high level. And not every incident, not every piece of reactive maintenance would go through this process. Some of them are very simple. Some of them are more complex. So it needs to be right-sized based on the incident and the priority and what the impact is. So we'll go to the next. So when we talk about triaging events, right, there's some, this is obviously not a complete list, but it's just food for thought here. What are our criteria? Is it something that's safety critical, right? Is it life safety? Is it egress, the ability to get in and out of a facility? Are they critical utilities that make for a environment to be a safe workplace environment, right? Is it heating, cooling? Is it ventilation? Is it power? Is it water? Are these things that are going to impact causing maybe a facility to be evacuated until it can be repaired? Or is it a non-safety thing, right? Is it just a room's too hot, or there's a faucet with a slow drip on it? Those are our initial evaluations. The second would be, does it impact occupancy, right? If you're in a school, like a school campus, classrooms, a public space, and offices in an administrative building, public spaces like for a library, is it still accessible? Is it still usable? And then you want to look at what would be the downtime. Is it going to take longer to repair? Is it a short repair? Is that short repair detracting from the ability to do something else? So those are the other things. That's where we feed into that priority. What's the priority? What are the skills? Do we have parts available? What's the lead time for part delivery? If we're not managing inventory, what's our estimated downtime, right? So if it's a simple repair or a series of simple things, those may have a lower priority until you're actually on site at a facility for something else, and then you could bundle that in, or maybe it's something I have to go and deal with right away. Those are the considerations to make in that triaging piece. Next. Right. And then how do I manage this? What are the tools? So obviously, you'd want some sort of an EAM solution that'd be suitable for facility maintenance and asset management. And, I can recommend one that would be very good. But also, do we want to be able to work mobile? Do I want to mobilize my workforce and enable my staff to go out in the field as they identify problems and create requests, create work orders, document work in the field? Do they need to be able to work offline? Are they going into a space that may not have connectivity either to Wi-Fi or cellular service? If they go down into the boiler room in the basement, are they going to be offline? Do they need a tool that they can still take their work with them electronically on and work on? So those things. And then, do I set up real-time alerts and dashboards and reporting tools so I can kind of see and monitor what's going on. That might be a SCADA system or some other type of control system that can send fault codes. That might be reporting on, logs and data gathered to look for trends, things like that. So these are all tools that can help an organization understand what their risk is, what potential repair they have coming up, what things they may be to look at, or simply what their backlog is and how to align backlog with other actions. And the data at a minimum we'd want to capture would be how long did it take to find the problem? How long does it take to respond to the problem? What actually caused it? So a superficial problem might be an indicator of a larger problem on the back end with a piece of equipment that we would want the ability to do some cause and analysis and some traceability of the problem. What parts do I need to use? If I'm frequently using similar parts, do I need to manage an actual inventory so they're available, or is a order when needed, just in time type delivery situation going to work? How well do I work with my materials vendors that I can get parts on time? These are all considerations to put in place to come up with an approach to essentially try and minimize impacts to your occupants and downtime of systems or equipment. So these are all considerations that can be managed within the framework of a software tool, a database tool, to facilitate quicker response times. Bradley, next. Yeah. So again, when we talk about reactive responses, I'm kind of reiterating here. We have safety first. Obviously, you're going to look at making sure that not only is a facility safe to use with when there's a problem reported, but is my staff, my team, my mechanics, are they prepared to respond? Right? Do I need permits? Right. So in the example, obviously, if you're talking about going underground into a vault or somewhere, there's some kind of a permit to close the street and modify that, or a permit to block a driveway or do something of that nature, or simply to access a facility on private property. Potentially, there's a procedure if you have facilities in an easement on someone else's property to access that, or if you're in a shared space, how do I gain access to the things I take care of versus the owner of the facility takes care of, and so on. Then we have, are there confined space rules? Do I need to have a certain certification to access a vault or a room or a location to take care of something? And do I have to do a lockout tagout process to make sure people are aware that something is turned off for a reason? Maybe there's a leak, or maybe there's some safety risk if I turn it back on. So I need to make sure I've got it locked out and tagged out so that can't happen until it's repaired. And then we look at the work order, which is the tool for managing the work or tracking the work. What's the scope? Do I have the work properly defined? Do I know what my activity coding is? When I assign the work to a technician, does he know what he's expected to do and what he's expected to verify when he's done, right? What's the impact of completing the work? Do I have to take systems offline? Am I impacting others by doing this? So these are all considerations. And of course, what am I expecting at the end, right? Something's going to be fixed, something's going to be operational, and it should be verifiable as well. And then finally, as you're going through this process, you need to keep your stakeholders in the loop, right? That would mean, facility managers or building managers. That would mean anyone who's responsible for facility safety, department heads, occupants, the individual who reported the problem. All of these become stakeholders that will likely need to be kept in the loop, because obviously the absence of information about something leads to assumptions that lead to thoughts that you're actually not responding or not doing something. So it's always good to be in communication across as you work through these things. Next. So another thing I wanted to highlight that aids some of the response time here is the management of spare parts and your vendor readiness. So you would want to have some, if downtime for a response is at risk, and obviously the materials aren't necessarily expirable, but they can be kept, you'd want to have critical spares in place in the event that something goes wrong. Do you have, and for example, working with agencies that do things like, manage lift stations or deal with sewer treatment, they'll often have a spare motor and a spare pump in the lift station. So if one of them goes offline, they can quickly swap them out and get it back online while they work on the repair of the one that failed. The one that gets repaired may become the spare now, and the ones that go operational, that were spared and swapped out. But the idea is that you have spare components available so you can quickly replace while you troubleshoot the problem with the item that failed, so that you don't have excessive downtime for a piece of equipment. So like I said, that could be a motor. It could simply be another, if you're dealing with an air handling unit and a belt goes bad, do I have a belt that I can quickly adjust and put on so that I keep things operational? So that's something to consider. The goal being to minimize risk to occupancy, to minimize downtime. I want to look at stocking levels, right? So if I have, items that maybe even thinking about PMs, possibly even reactive maintenance, do I want to stock items handily? Like, for boilers, air handling units, elevators, like, do I have simple repairs that might deal with, say, specialized lighting in an elevator, or filters for an air handling unit, or maybe I keep any type of lubrication material available in case something needs to be lubricated, etc. So, what kind of parts inventory do I carry, and what kind of stocking quantities do I keep? So I'm not overstocking, but at the same time, I'm ready if something, a mission critical piece of equipment goes down, I can get it back online quickly. The other thing would be if you need vendor support, to have pre-negotiated agreements with your vendors and passive escalation, so that if something goes down, you need a vendor, you have an agreement that when you contact them, they respond in a period of time. And if they can't, you know how to escalate to get that response, right? Excuse me. That should be in place ahead of time, especially for critical equipment. But as a general rule of thumb, it's a good idea to have that in place. And then, thinking of the concept of just in time versus safety stock, be thoughtful in how you balance this, right? So you may not want to stock a lot of filters because they take up a lot of space, and you can coordinate your preventive maintenance around knowing that maybe you have a 2-day, 1 day or 2-day delivery. So you just schedule so that you order and then you open the work orders and do the work when they arrive, versus things that you want to keep on hand, for that just because situation that you just need to deal with, right? So those are considerations to make. Each agency is going to have a different take on this. You have different types of equipment. You have different types of facilities that have critical or less critical operations. So it's just something to consider in terms of what I need to have handy, where I need to keep it stocked. I've worked with organizations that will keep a spare supply of materials right in the mechanical room next to the item, so that if they have to swap it out, they can do it quickly. It's the time it takes to take it offline, remove the old piece or the defective piece, and put the new one on and get it back up and running, versus having to take it offline, order the part, hopefully it arrives shortly, but it could be tomorrow, in which case you may have a unit offline overnight. So those are considerations to make. And next. So again, the other thing to consider is how you manage your resources, right? So do you have on-call rosters? Do you have people that work on call that are available on the weekend? So that if an activity persists, whether it's on one of your facility campuses, whether it's in a building, is there someone that can be called immediately and who's expecting to potentially be called in to deal with a critical issue, especially when you're dealing with facilities that might have a non-traditional working time, like an EOS center, a 911 center. Sometimes when you're dealing with campus facilities like universities or community colleges, they have night classes, things where you need someone to be on call in the evening. uh, you know, recreation centers, that are open late for sporting events in the evening. Work with a customer, they have ice rinks that are open 18, 19 hours a day, and they need staff available while it's open for coverage in case problems occur. So making sure you have a good schedule, a good balance of deploying resources over time throughout the day. Also look at cross training to have people that are trained to do things maybe outside of their normal path, like you know uh, mechanical and plumbing. Right, I have mechanical experts, but I have plumbers. But maybe there's some of the mechanical work that I can cross train a plumber to help with in the event that we end up with a large volume of work at any given time, right? So always have a backup as well. Always train a backup. So if you're have someone who's dedicated to a specific facility, they should have a backup, someone that can come in when they're off or they're sick or on PTO, that at least knows where things are, knows some of the history of equipment, can execute preventive maintenance work orders in their absence, things of that nature. So you don't basically just have no coverage for that period of time. When you have shifts, you should have clear shift handoffs and documentation. What occurred during the shift, what might be a carryover issue for the next shift to monitor. Maybe something was repaired, but there's some concern. So you let that person coming on the swing shift or the night shift know that keep an eye on this piece of equipment. It's been acting strangely, for example. And make sure you have external contractors that you trust, that are specialized in the work you're hiring them for, and that have been vetted for their competency and their capabilities, right? So you don't want to just call, the first number in the phone book, but you want to be able to have someone on that's available to you, that is familiar with your environment, your facilities, and that you have some reliability in terms of the quality of work you're going to get. So go next. Okay. And then the other thing is making sure that you document everything you did. So the work you performed, the parts you used, the hours it spent. You can capture downtime, through a work management system based on coding, and encourage your maintenance techs to be extensive with their notes, to talk about, what they did, to record, I should say, how they repaired something, right? So that you can also start looking for trends in repair, and knowing that 2, 3, 4, 5 months down the road, that work order, right? The amount of time it took, the materials that were used, the procedures that were followed will be important to someone else if they have to do a similar piece of repair work on a piece of equipment, or for that matter, they're repairing something different in the system that may be a result of previously done work, or may be impacted by work previously done. Try and identify root cause, especially for larger problems, but even for smaller ones. It's not a bad idea to understand what caused that, right? Was the conference room too hot because the thermostat malfunctioned, or was it too hot because there's a problem in the ventilation, or it traces back to that rooftop unit that's supposed to be generating and feeding cold air? Try and understand that and then make sure that when you're dealing with longer term fixes or notifications, that you understand how that impacts your maintenance backlog, right? So use a scheduling tool. So if something's going to take more time to do, make sure you're scheduling appropriate time for it, and you're notifying folks that it may be offline for a while, or we're going to be working on this, etc. So it's important to keep all of that documented, as well as actions taken always. And then obviously notification, communication with stakeholders is key to maintaining a happy customer base. We want to make sure we update the asset history, again, by properly documenting on a work order. That kind of goes together. And then understand what follow-up tasks might be available, what might be needed. Do we want to make sure we set up a recurring check on this. Is it something that we fixed? We know the unit may need replacement later, but can't be replaced for a while. Do I need to set up some type of a follow-up task in order to be able to track that effectively? And next again, Bradley. And then, some of the things, like I said, that could be quick wins, that might be practical improvements. I've alluded to this already, but, think about pre-staging spares. Create standardized triage checklists, like a checklist. Hey, if there's a problem, I need to, look at 5, 6, 7 points and make sure I'm hitting them all. Think about setting up, templates for work orders. How can we kind of standardize responses? Um, if you're doing root cause analysis, pre-build templates for that. It makes it easier to do if you've got a structured form or format that you can go in that asks questions that you can respond to rather than just kind of making it up. Also look at ongoing training. I refer to it as micro training, but the idea that you might have, job aids, short webinars, short little videos, some mentoring in staff, but make sure that staff is properly trained. And I notice here, like things like safe lifting, simple safety procedures to prevent injury as well, which helps encourage uptime of resources and keep people at work rather than at home on sick leave. And definitely make sure to streamline communication with occupants and customers. Is it possible to put up dashboards, status boards, alerts, notifications to keep them in the loop or to give them some insight into what you're doing? A lot of times that helps mitigate potential for assumptions, gossip. It reduces risk of a disconnect between the facility management team and the occupants of the facility. And I think Bradley next. So, and then some things I think, and I know we're kind of at time here, so be mindful of that. But some things to kind of avoid would be to try and get out of the reactive only mindset, to not chase work, but to look to kind of steer towards a more proactive path, which would include preventive maintenance, and then try and make sure to capture data, avoid over reliance on an individual contractor, maybe spread the wealth a little bit because it gives you more contacts, and of course, again, communicate. And Bradley, I think you were going to jump in there for a minute, and then, yeah, the final thing was, if I could do real quick, was try and look for to get started, really, try and look for a couple of things that can be quick wins that you feel you can accomplish quickly and that will work in your organization, right? So think about that. It's like they say, the journey of 1,000 steps starts with the first step. And think about, what could we do tomorrow to make us a little better? Something easy, something simple. And then the same thing the next day, same thing the next day. But just think of little things. It doesn't have to be a big overhaul. It might just be, just a few little things, and gradually work on refining your workflows, your materials, your forms, your reporting templates, etc. So I think with that, I'll wrap up, because I think I went a minute or two over my allotted time.
Thank you, Doug. And if anyone has any questions about this session, you can email Doug at doug.henstridge@assetworks.com.